Hello my friends and welcome back. It's Friday. That means you survived the week and so did I. Yes, I'm glad. Today I'm going to a bar. At night I'm going to a bar. I think many of you will also go to a bar. So I'm glad this is the last day of the week. But unfortunately I cannot begin with a joke today because very serious attack happened against Ukrainian electrical infrastructure. And one of the biggest Russian attacks this year actually. I couldn't put a joke at the beginning of this video because this is serious enough. And I apologize for that. I'll try to deliver it for you as lightly as possible. Yesterday, Russia fired out 63 Shahed drones, 12 Iskander ballistic missiles, 40 H-101 and H-555 cruise missiles, 5 H-22 cruise missiles, 7 Kinjal missiles, 2 H-59 guided missiles, and 22 S-300 or S-400 anti-aircraft missiles all over Ukraine. That means well over 150 flying objects in the air, including drones and missiles against Ukrainian targets. Interception rates was pretty good, but since the attack was in such large scale, those that were not intercepted did, well, I couldn't even say a lot of damage, I could only say enormous amount of damage. 55 Shahed drones and 35 H-101 and 2 H-59s were intercepted, which is a pretty big number. But the ones that didn't hit two critical targets, one of which is the Zaporizhia hydroelectric power plant, which is part of one of the biggest dam systems in Europe at all, like period, in the whole of Europe. And destroying that dam would cause a humanitarian catastrophe. Now, my friends, I'll be reading you the summary of the outcome of these two attacks against, one of them was almost all of Kharkiv's electrical and water infrastructure. And yes, Kharkiv, the entire city, the second biggest city in Ukraine, is in pitch black darkness tonight. That means a lot of damage was done to the electrical infrastructure. On the night of March 22nd, Russian troops massively attacked Ukraine's energy sector. There is a hit to Dnipro hydroelectric power plant in Zaporizhia. There is no threat of a breakthrough. Traffic on the Dnipro HPP dam is closed. Breakthrough, they mean the water breaking through the dam. And you can see the dam on the photos on the screen also. This dam is one of the biggest, one of the largest, not the largest, but one of the largest in Europe. And it holds a massive amount of water. If it would be destroyed, this water wave would flood civilians in the amounts of tens of thousands. And there would be a similar amount of casualties. So Russians are really playing with a humanitarian catastrophe here. Russians have launched 12 missile strikes in Zaporizhia. There are wounded. Zaporizhia NPP is connected to the Ukrainian power grid by only one power line and is on the verge of blackout. In Kharkiv, the Russians hit energy facilities more than 15 times and there are hits in critical infrastructure. The city is almost completely without electricity and there are interceptions in water supply. So this is one of the biggest, and I don't want to admit this, but one of the more effective Russian attacks against Ukrainian civilian water and electrical infrastructure, resulting in blackout, the whole blackout of the second biggest city in Ukraine. In Russia, this would mean the whole blackout of St. Petersburg, which is unimaginable to me. So this is a huge attack. As you can see, my friends, this attack on the hydroelectric power plant was also broadcasted on Russian TV and Russian YouTube. Unfortunately, people and the military could actually watch in live stream how precise their missiles were, which is sick in any way, in all different levels. And the fact that they're able to do it and get immediate feedback of their accuracy is also very stupid. These cameras should be disabled, but for some reason they were rolling. They knew exactly where they hit and how good their aim was. My friends, now let's do a very quick look back to history. 1 minute only, I promise you. But this you see on the photo here is Khreshchatyk. I've been there many times in Kiev. Our hotel is there and we walk there daily when we're in Kiev. This is before and after World War II, and as you can see, completely destroyed by World War II. Now, what the West kind of accepted, what the Soviets propagandized, is that everything was done by the Third Reich. Every bombardment, every crime was done by the Third Reich. They were kind of like the scapegoat of World War II. But the reality is The Soviets bombarded most of the cities. Stalin had no respect for beautiful architecture or infrastructure of the civilians, the necessity of it. He had no issues in bombarding it to the ground, to oblivion. This was also done by the retreating Red Army. Yes, the retreating Red Army. That means they could have left the city, but they decided also to destroy it. And that's what they did to most of the cities. They retreated. Also in Estonia, in Tallinn and Tartu, two of the biggest cities in Estonia, the retreating Red Army, not the advancing Third Reich Army, but the retreating Red Army bombarded these cities when they were leaving. So they were just destroying using the scorched earth policy by Stalin. Now this is the photo of the same Zaporizhia hydroelectric power plant dam in 1941, and who blew it up? The retreating Soviets. They did. Stalin gave the order, and that resulted in deaths of tens of thousands of civilians. In this war, we have hundreds of thousands of dead of soldiers, but we have tens of thousands of dead civilians on the Ukrainian side. Well, Stalin's order is only this one wave of water killed tens of thousands of Ukrainians. He didn't care at all about the Ukrainians. I mean, ordering the Holodomor, the starvation of the Ukrainian nation in the 30s, already shows this. The thing is, Russians have done it before. Of course, the Nazis blew it up also when they retreated. And the Russians are doing it again now, showing no care for human life in the area. So if anybody in the West is surprised of this behavior or these attacks, then there's nothing to be surprised of, because this has been happening 100 years ago. And even more, if you live next to Russia, you know, this is their military playbook. Exactly written down, scorched earth policy, destroy everything. It's exactly their doctrine, and there's nothing new about it. So it is not surprising to me. It's unfortunately very sad. My friends, Russian Ministry of Defense, under Putin's order, has announced, well, the Shoigu actually, the defense minister, has announced the formation of two entire new armies. Two entire new armies. While they're struggling with sending enough manpower to Ukraine, they're forming two new armies. This is insane. This is an official announcement from the Ministry of Defense. And I'll open up a little bit. What does this mean? Because for sure Russia does not have the capability to form two entirely new armies. To fill them with manpower, officers and equipment, no way. But they're announcing it anyway. So what's the deal? Two new combined armies are at least 400,000 troops, 200,000 each. In additional 14 divisions, at least 63,000 men, 4,500 each, and 16 brigades, at least 16,000 troops, 1,000 each. This is all that the Ministry of Defense promised. Two armies, 14 divisions, and 16 brigades. Total 479, let's say 480,000 new troops and equipment, everything that is combined in the two armies, would be formed in addition to what Russia has now in Ukraine. And they have about 500,000 troops in Ukraine. And Shoigu just announced that they will be mobilizing almost 500,000 extra for entire two new armies. How is this possible? Well, my friends, short answer is that it's not. These armies will exist on paper. And this is why it is so important to name your goals correctly. We don't want peace in Ukraine. We want Ukrainian victory. Because peace in Ukraine right now means that Russia and Ukraine will not be fighting anymore. And Russia, knowing Russian foreign doctrine, every peace is just a pause before the next war, because this is how it has been for the last 500 years with Russia. Peace and the pause and ceasefire would mean that they would immediately get to work to actually forming these two new armies. We don't even have to hypothesize it. We know it because they have announced it. They have announced their entire plan, and it's written in their war military doctrine book. There's actually a book that they follow. So it's all public. We know exactly what is going to happen as soon as the hostilities end for Russia, and they don't have to send all their tanks into Ukraine anymore. What does it mean? It means that Russia needs full-scale mobilization and needs a lot of the hardware. One motorized rifle division has 214 tanks. Tank division has 312 tanks. If from these divisions half will be motorized rifle divisions, they must have 1,700 tanks and much more infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. An army supply brigade consists of 3 to 4 transportation motor transport battalions and other units. The brigade has about 1,700 vehicles. This is one brigade, and we're talking about like 16 new brigades. So we're talking about 20,000 plus vehicles, new vehicles, completely separate from the war in Ukraine. All these new formations need tens of thousands of vehicles. This is the officially publicized Russian Ministry of Defense plan. Putin's order and the Minister of Defense Shoigu announced it. And the West is sometimes thinking, the Western leaders, oh, we don't know what Russia is doing. They're unpredictable. My friends, Putin has announced his plans. I think for the last 10 years in interviews, you can hear him announcing his plans, always mentioning that the Baltic countries are not real countries, that he wants to take them back. And then the West is like, Putin is unpredictable. No, he has always said what he's going to do. The West just doesn't believe it. And then he does it, and then the West is surprised. So it is a weird situation. I would advise to actually listen to what he's saying, because he's announcing his every step. Now he is announcing that as soon as the hostilities end, he will form 2 entire new armies for the attack against NATO. This is his plan. All these new units need new bases, residential accommodations, supply chain, training ranges, etc. To do all this within the year is impossible, because yes, they announced that they will be doing this within a year. So to sum up, Russians have publicized to the entire world what is their exact plan as soon as the hostilities end in Ukraine. Why do I say as soon as the hostilities end? Because right now the reality is that every Russian tank, ACP, infantry fighting vehicle and man that is mobilized into the army or produced will immediately be sent to Ukraine. This is how they keep the attacks going in Ukraine in 5 directions. As soon as this stops, they will start stockpiling men and equipment and weapons for the formation of these new 2 armies, because they have announced it. So we know exactly what is going to happen after the ceasefire, and this is why I am against the ceasefire. You heard it correctly. If you might blame me in warmongering, then no, I want peace. I love peace. But with an adversary like Russia, peace doesn't mean ceasefire. Peace only means the destruction of Russia. Russia needs to lose to learn peace. To respect your authority, their asses need to be kicked. That's how simple it is. It has been like that for forever, as long as Russia has existed. Just a peculiarity of that country. Now, the Russian State Duma has approved a law that significantly simplifies the recruitment of criminals from prisons to participate in the military activities. So this shows us that Putin doesn't want to declare mobilization. He's afraid of it. After the election, I am waiting for Putin to make a decision that is very unpopular, because that's what he usually does. Immediately after the election, he does the most unpopular decisions, because then he has his safe support for the next 6 years. Now, we all know this is supposed to be mobilization order, but he's afraid of that like fire, because last mobilization, it was even only a partial mobilization, triggered 1 million men to leave Russia. Most wealthy, most knowledgeable, intelligent people left Russia. That was very painful for Russia, and he knows it. So he is afraid of declaring mobilization like fire. But Russia needs it, especially with the announcement of 400,000 new troops to be taken into the Russian armed forces, in addition to forces in Ukraine. So he does need mobilization. But the fact that the State Duma now made it so much more simple to just take prisoners as meat shows that Putin is postponing mobilization for as long as possible, but he cannot avoid it. And my friends, this is not only on paper, the State Duma process to make taking prisoners as meat assault. This is actually emptying Russian prisons. And why is Putin doing this? Because he has no regard for civilian human life. And secondly, keeping up prisons is quite expensive for a country. In Russia, the country's budget has to pay for prisons. It's not a private company like it is in some other countries. Meaning that Putin, if he sends prisoners to die, he will soak up the Western ammunition in Ukraine, meaning it's good for his war effort, and he will not have to pay to keep up these prisoners in Russia. It's good for the money. So in Putin's eyes, like Stalin said, no man, no problem. The death of 1 man is a tragedy. The death of 1,000 is statistics. This is exactly the playbook Putin is following, gaining more money by sending the prisoners to die and soaking up the Western ammunition in Ukraine. Now I'm just opening up how the Russian mindset, how Putin thinks, where the decisions come from. And if you really look at it like that, and analyze their foreign doctrine, military doctrine, which is written down with bullet points in a book. There's nothing surprising about that. They follow an exact map of what to do. So we must study that map. Read the Soviet military doctrine book. It's all in there. Gulag system is not only for prisoners, it's a potential man pool for foreign invasion. You can just send them to die, to soak up the adversary's ammunition. You get rid of the dissidents and you get rid of the enemy. This is exactly what Putin is doing. 2 correctional facilities in the Krasnoyarsk region of Russia will soon be closed. Almost all convicts will be transferred to the armed forces to participate in the war against Ukraine. So the situation is so dire, I mean, not dire for Putin, but they have literally emptied 2 entire prisons, sending all the guys who don't go to war to other prisons and sending the rest to fight in Ukraine as meat assaults, meat battalions, and they will close the prisons, which will keep a lot of money in Putin's pocket because keeping up prison system is pretty expensive. My friends, the European Union leaders are gathering now for months already, and now we're at the ending stages of the process of allocating the interest gathered from the Russian assets in the EU to buying weapons for Ukraine. So Russia has about 300 billion worth of assets, 300 billion USD worth of assets in the West. That includes North America and the EU. Now, the EU, of course, can only control the assets in the EU, and we are not there that we can allocate the funds itself for Ukraine. What they are doing right now is that the interests gathered from these huge funds, these interests will be allocated to Ukraine to buy weapons. Meaning, let's take the number of 100 billion that Russia holds in the EU. I mean, not holds, but it's frozen in the EU. Russia cannot get that money, but the EU also cannot move that money to help Ukraine because of bureaucracy and legal. You just cannot do it fast. You need to find a very certain path to do that. Now, it's very difficult. They're trying to do that. It takes time. What they have been able to do is use the interests, which is a few percent, perhaps 0.5% of the entire sum every year, or 1%, however big the percentage is. But if you look at 100 billion, and even 0.5% from that is a huge amount of money yearly, and that has been gathering for 2.5 years now. They are buying weapons for Ukraine with that money in the near future, which is a huge plus because that guarantees that Russian assets will earn regular interest, and these regular interest will be periodically used to buy weapons for Ukraine, ensuring a steady cash flow to Ukraine from Russian assets, which is beautiful. I love it. Way to go, EU. My friends, now something lighter for you. I mean, it's not funny, but this is Dragon's Teeth Factory. Finally, something light and nice to just watch. It's just a production process. This is how Ukraine makes Dragon's Teeth. Now you might think, oh, this is so dumb and stupid. It's so easy to make Dragon's Teeth. It's only concrete. But Russian Dragon's Teeth started crumbling with the first rains, meaning they used the wrong kind of mixture because the owner of the factory saved hundreds of millions by putting less expensive materials into it. So it's very important that you use the exact right material, that it would hold up onto rain, onto ice and everything. So Ukrainian Dragon's Teeth hold on a little bit better and they actually stop tanks better. But in the end, they're kind of the same. But this is how it looks. You fill it up with concrete, you add the metal rebar into it. This is the outline. They harden inside, you pull them out, boom, you get a mass production of Dragon's Teeth. And Ukraine does need hundreds of thousands of these. Here we can see a guy bending the rebar. I don't know, for some reason, industrial process videos are very satisfying to watch for me, like mass industrial process videos. It's beautiful. It's a very simple process, as you can see, and these are actually effective. And I do have to admit, when Russia was building the Surovikin line, I was claiming that static defenses don't have a place in the 21st century, and that Surovikin line stopped a lot of Ukrainian attacks. So now Ukraine is also finishing their Donbas line with the Dragon's Teeth and minefields and anti-tank ditches. They work. Static defenses work. I was wrong. My friends, now I bring you update from the NAFO fella from Finland, Joni Askola. You can find his Twitter link in the description below. And the first topic he covers for us is Ukraine is developing new weapon system. Because we all know, yeah, Ukraine is building weapons, Nobody actually acknowledges how big of a chunk they have bitten off. They are building everything. Literally everything that there is, they are building. except perhaps for fighter jets, but everything else. We know about Ukrainian Beaver kamikaze drone, Magura maritime drones, Neptune anti-ship missiles, and Stuna anti-tank guided missiles. Ukraine is constantly innovating and creating new systems. Ukraine's legendary Minister of Strategic Industries, Alexander Kamyshin, recently said that Ukraine had developed a locally made, so made in Ukraine, missile with a range of more than 400 miles. Now, Ukraine is big on drones and Russia is big on missiles, but now Ukraine has developed their own missile, their own cruise missile. Ukraine has also developed their own anti-ship missile, Neptune. So they have their own cruise missile and their own anti-ship missile in addition to hundreds of different drone types that they have. He also said that Ukraine is working on air defense systems and multiple rocket launchers. So Ukraine is now producing their own air defense systems and MLRS. And they're also producing their own armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, their own logistics trucks, their maritime drones. They're buying Navy from the UK and France. I mean, they will have everything that a very evolved military should have. It just takes time. They have set in motion the long-term plans. Factories will be built in Ukraine. Ukrainian factories will be built in the Western nations. I mean, in 10 years, that army will be unbeatable. Now, my friends, another point from Joni, and it is about, unfortunately, the most effective Russian weapon system in Ukraine that has proved to be very deadly, and there's no antidote for it. That is the Russian glide bomb. That is a Fab 500, Fab 1000, Fab 2000, just a dumb bomb from the Soviet era that Russia has a lot, and they're cheap to make. And they just slap a guidance kit on it, which is also relatively cheap and mass producible, and they're able to produce them. And boom, you get a very big kaboom with relatively small amount of money. And unfortunately, they're able to produce them in Russia, mass scale, mostly from Russian components, which means that the glide bomb will not be very precise because they're not able to produce, or microchips able to do precise calculations. But it's not important because the Fab 2000 is enormous. It's gigantic. So if you miss with 20, 30, even 50 meters, the kaboom from it is so big that it does the job. So what Russia lacks in precision, they make up in sheer amount of explosives. And now, unfortunately, the Minister of Defense announced that the Fab 3000, so 3-ton explosive bomb, will be entering mass production in Russia. They will slap the guidance kit on it, and it is the Russian glide bomb. It will not be precise, but even if Fab 3000 misses with 100 meters, which by NATO standards would just miss the target and not do anything, this bomb will create a crater so big that every trench, every underground tunnels, everything will be destroyed. It's just so vastly, it's gigantic. It's a Tsar bomba of explosive bombs. How can Ukraine counter this growing threat? There are no easy single solutions to that, but there are 5 ways that can help Ukraine counter their Russian glide bombs. More movement. Glide bombs can only hit fixed targets and they are quite slow. The target needs to be identified before the bomber takes off. Staying on the move as much as possible increases the chances of surviving by a lot. When not being able to move, more digging. More fortification and better camo are necessary. If Russians can't see you, they won't hit you. And if they do hit you, you better be underground inside a fortification that allows you to potentially survive. Now, if we talk about Fab 500, Fab 1000, okay, you go to your underground bunker, you might be fine. It's shaky. But if you talk about Fab 3000, that vicinity, whatever it is, bunker or not, that will decimate everything. It's just so big. Number 3, more air defense systems with enough range to shoot down Russian bombers before they launch the bombs. It's risky to bring systems close to the front, but in wars you need to take risks sometimes. That would require getting more Patriot batteries and missiles. Unfortunately, yes, we have records and visual confirmation of 2 Patriot systems being destroyed by the Russians. So Ukraine is very careful in bringing those Patriot systems close to the front because they are so effective that they will need to be protected. Number 4, using the F-16 jets. Ukraine doesn't have any jets yet, but once they do and get enough of them, they will be able to use them to keep Russian bombers further away or just shoot them down, very bluntly put, when they come into the firing sector, which is Russian bombers release their glide bombs about 15 clicks away from the front. This is well within the range of F-16s, hundreds of kilometers away. And 5 more and better decoys. I think this would be the best way because Ukraine can make the decoys right now and the Russians would use up their glide bombs and Ukraine wouldn't lose anything. This would be one of the best ways. And number 6, more hits on Russian air bases to force them to keep bombers further away, which would complicate their use to bomb the front line. And this is what Ukraine is doing actively also because recently they bombarded Engels air base with drones. And one day before the bombardment, satellite photos showed 10 Tu-95, Tupolev 95 nuclear-capable bombers right next to each other in close, tight formations, parked on that runway. So we don't know if Ukraine hit them or not, but they're doing that. 6th point. Thank you, Joni Askola, for this nice analysis. And you can see his analysis on my Twitter account, which is linked in the description below also. Now, my friends, my favorite part of the video, which is butchering the Buy Me a Coffee members who have become monthly members. I will get your name butchered in a way you will never be able to forget. Tetuks Kuts, Martin Hedin, Ronan Mandra, Edward Lappine, Jai Kue, Carles Kraven, Oneirda, Matthias Raisk, Joe. Thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you. If you like my channel, subscribe to it, press the bell notification to be notified when I upload, and become a member of Buy Me a Coffee. Until my next video, which is on Monday, so you gotta survive the weekend. Be back, my friends. Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.